Good afternoon, and welcome to Pay Entry's weekly webinar. Um, Today, we're going to be talking about harassment in the workplace and what employers are responsible for. Why should you care about harassment in the workplace? I'm Kathy Graham. By looking at the attendee list, I know many of you and feel like I'm talking to old friends today. So I'm head of the HR services area at Pay Entry, and I also have someone who works with me. Her name is Brianna Grimes. She's awesome, and you may be talking with her instead of me when you're asking some questions. So I just wanted to let you know there's one other person in the department at this time. Okay, so let's talk today about workplace harassment. What is it? We're going to determine the types of harassment in the workplace and why should you care? You have a lot to do, and just this is adding one more thing to monitor on your list. What are the types of harassment? It's not just sexual harassment we're talking about. Who can be a harasser, and how you establish boundaries, how you train for awareness, how you handle a complaint properly, and what should you do overall? We'll wrap it up at the end with that. So what is workplace harassment? Well, according to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, that's the EEOC, that's the department of the government that monitors discrimination. Harassment is unwelcome verbal or physical conduct that's based on race, color, religion, sex, that includes pregnancy, national origin, age, 40 or older, disability, or genetic information. So that's a lot. That's a lot of different categories. And why should we care about this? Well, first of all, it's illegal. Harassment is illegal. It's against the law, and you can get in a lot of trouble as an employer for not doing something about it if it's occurring in your workplace. It violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. It violates the Age Discrimination in Employment Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act. So there are three rules, depending on what the harassee is being harassed for or about, determines which act would be appropriate to consider. And there are various state and local laws dealing with harassment and how an employer should deal with it and what repercussions can come about by not taking the appropriate steps. In 2018, just to give you some statistics, the EEOC filed 66 harassment lawsuits, and that is more than a 50% increase over 2017. Now, these are lawsuits. A lot of things never get to the lawsuit level. They're settled out of court. So 66 might seem like a very small number, but it's actually, these are really big lawsuits against big companies like uh, Family Dollar, Home Depot, Lowe's, a lot of the big companies that we know about. The EEOC recovered nearly $70 million for the victims of harassment in 2018, up from 47.5 million in 2017. So the numbers are increasing. We don't have the 2019 numbers. We should have those sometime by the first of next year, but it is a very expensive process and can be very punitive to a company. And by the way, you will receive, by attending this, a copy of this recording immediately following the webinar. And if you have any questions during the webinar, I forgot to tell you that there is a question box on your screen, and you can ask questions there, and I will answer them at the end of the session. So again, why should we care? Harassment's not only illegal, it's unethical. It damages your organization's culture and its values. It affects applicants' and employees' view of the company. It can impact productivity and your bottom line. If you have a level of unrest in your organization, the engagement gets lower when that happens, and so does productivity. In addition, not just the company, but individuals can be held liable for violating harassment rules. The average out-of-court settlement is $100,000, and that can be an individual that is sued or an individual and a company, remember. If you lose in a court case, you're looking at closer to $250,000 for one charge. And if there are multiple people in your organization in this lawsuit, then it would be multiplied by the number of employees. Some cases actually have resulted in charges that exceed $1 million. I know there is a large retailer here in town that I worked for at one point in time, and there was a harassment suit filed, and it kind of slipped through the manager's cracks, wasn't forwarded to the appropriate people to handle. It ended up costing the company well over $1 million. So it is important to pay attention to these things. Let's talk about the types of harassment. Now, we know all about sexual harassment because of the hashtag #MeToo movement. We know that it is the most common form, and that it's called sexual harassment in the workplace, can be quid pro quo. And that's Latin for this for that. And basically that means that someone, a manager or a supervisor or someone else, is conditioning the terms of employment on sexual requests, or you can have a hostile work environment being created by the sexual harassment. It is unwanted sexual behavior, either verbal or physical. And there is another type of harassment called discriminatory harassment, and this is very prominent. It's pretty much offensive comments or behavior that target a person's race, their sex, including a pregnancy. It could include age if someone is over 40 years old, a disability, or genetic information. Slurs, negative stereotyping or threatening, intimidating, hostile acts in the workplace, including just a joke or a prank that someone might think is meaningless, could be considered hostile or demeaning by someone it might be targeted at. Continuing with discriminatory harassment, written or graphic material that kind of puts down or shows hostility towards an individual because of one of these things like race, color, religion, etc. Making a comment about someone's dress, how they are dressed, or the type of food that they eat at lunch, or someone who's nearing retirement asking them when they're going to retire, calling them old man or old woman, joking about that. Those things can be harassment against one of the above reasons. If it's displayed, it can be on walls or bulletin boards or other locations on your premises, or something circulated through the workplace. So who can be a harasser? Well, that can be any person that has a relationship with your company. It can be another employee, so employee to employee. It can be a supervisor or manager harassing an employee or another manager. It can be a customer of yours or a client. It can be one of your vendors that comes into the workplace. It could be a contractor, an independent contractor that you've hired. So with that in mind, you know that you need to establish boundaries within your workplace. Start at the top. If you don't start everything at the top, you don't get the buy-in of the management. So make sure that your leadership is invested in this process. If they don't care, whatever you do is not going to take much effect or have much effect or stay in place very long because it has to be supported by top management and by your culture because that is part of leadership. Have your top management staff or your CEO draft a supporting email to all employees to show that they are behind the efforts that you're getting ready to make and take against harassment. Make sure that you have a zero tolerance policy for harassment at work. That should be in your handbook. We do review handbooks, so if you ever want us to look at your handbook to make sure that it's complete, please let us know. We'll be glad to take a look at that for you. But it also, if you roll out a new policy at work or a new, well, harassment policy at work, you need to have something that you send out to employees and that you have acknowledged by them with a written response or a signature. In that policy, you need to define harassment because there are people who don't know that it's not just sexual harassment. Make sure you include a prohibition statement stating your position on any type of harassment. And outline your complaint procedure. Make sure that that's very clear and that there are um, words in your policy that don't allow that state that you will not allow retaliation for a complaint. Make sure that your complaint procedure is very clear and let them know who to go to and how that process works. So there's no confusion about complaints. Describe what disciplinary measures you would take if someone is found guilty of harassment in the workplace. Make that very clear and make sure that that applies at all levels. Include a statement of protection against retaliation. Make sure that you give employees options for reporting a complaint. They can complain to their direct supervisor, to HR, to senior management. If their direct supervisor is part of the problem, obviously they're not going to go to HR. If senior management happens to be a part of the problem, then they're not going to go there. They'll end up in the HR department. But make sure that they know that they have places to go or people to talk to about their complaint. Communicate your policy to all your employees, but don't stop there. Make sure that your contractors and your vendors are very aware of your zero tolerance policy. That's very important. Now, certain states require harassment training, and it is the law. California, New York, Delaware, Connecticut. In DC, it's only for tipped employees, but it is there. Maine, Illinois, and Washington State all have laws that prohibit harassment and that require that you train your employees. Supervisor training is different from employee training because they have people that they will receive complaints from or could, and they need to know how to handle that. So there are two levels of training, the employee and the supervisor level. We're currently doing that training right now. Actually, it starts in October, which today's October the 1st. So we have several sessions scheduled this month for harassment training for employees and harassment training for the supervisors or managers. We also make sure that our this training is specific. So if it is a California supervisor or California employee, there will be a different training for them. The others, New York through Washington State, we have made sure that we address that in the trainings, um, so that each company that's in the training that has employees in those states knows the rules for that state. So we're very specific about that. Brianna Grimes is doing all of that training, and bless her heart, the supervisor training is almost 2 hours long, and I don't think she can talk after she's talked for that length of time. But if you're interested in that, go to our website or send me an email and I'll get you more information on it. Just remember that this is required by the end of December for the states that we're looking at on the screen right now. If you haven't done any training, you need to start that because the deadline is December the 31st. And if you just like to take one of our classes to see what it's like, we'll be glad to have you sit in on those. It is a much more thorough look at harassment in the workplace because it's the legal version of it. This is just an overview to tell you what you need to be doing. The training that you provide should be mandatory for all employees. We're all at Pay Entry going through this training right now, and there is interaction between the trainer and the individuals who are taking it, and it does track whether or not they are participating. So it's very good training, and they get a certificate after it's all over with to show that they've completed it. But that certificate is required, or some tracking mechanism in the states above to make sure that everyone has been trained. And there are rules about training employees in the first year that they're employed or within the first 90 days. So if you'd like more specific information on your state, please let me know. Training as I mentioned, needs to be conducted at least once a year, and it should include what constitutes unacceptable behavior in your workplace, how to recognize harassment, which you would think we would, but some people don't understand really what harassment is, and steps to report inappropriate behavior or what they feel might be harassment in the workplace. We encourage in our training for those who see it but aren't a part of it, um, they report it if the person that is being harassed is too afraid to talk to someone themselves. You need to report it if you've seen it and you feel that it's harmful. You need to create, and we have, specialized training for managers and supervisors. Um, they have to develop, or they should, through this training, develop a skill for recognizing what is happening in the workplace or harassment, any that's occurring. And it should teach them how to respond to a complaint. No complaint should be ignored or passed off as not important or not harassment. If someone complains, it needs to be investigated. Handling harassment issues to performance management process um, is also a part of this. It's a process to hold people accountable. So you need to add this to your performance management process for those managers and supervisors. So how do you handle a complaint? Make sure that you have established an effective complaint procedure. It should be in writing, and it should be where people have seen it or can see it or access it. Very quickly investigate any claim. Don't sit on it. Even though it might be awkward because of the person who is being charged with the a claim of harassment, you need to move quickly on it. Don't negatively impact the person filing a complaint. That means don't send them home or don't move them to a different area of the building so that they don't come into contact with that person. There are rules about how to do that, and if you need additional rules on that, I would suggest that you sign up for our supervisory training to get some more ideas. But you don't want to penalize the person. Do whatever you have to, however, to stop the harassment immediately. And discipline the person who committed this harassment if appropriate. So I may have missed a step in here. Do whatever necessary to stop the harassment immediately and then investigate in between those two, because you want a thorough investigation and you want to make sure you have all the facts before you discipline someone for something they didn't do. And then document your investigation and the steps that you've taken to remedy the solution. This will be very, very important if this turns into a lawsuit, because that's where the court will, or the attorneys will want to see what you did to remedy the situation. During the process, take every complaint seriously. If it's Joe and Joe's always touchy-feely and he doesn't mean anything by it, but someone's bothered by it, you need to take it seriously. Investigate every single complaint that comes through and try not to make credibility judgments based on the reputation of the person being accused. That doesn't matter if someone complains. Remain objective. And definitely don't leave it to the two parties to work it out. That is absolutely against the rules. So first of all, you need to revisit, what are you going to do about this? Revisiting your company culture. You need to define what you want your culture to look like. And many of us have been through that process. And that's not an easy process because of the mix of people you have and the relationships that are there. But define what you want your culture to look like, and then determine where the changes need to be made. Because if you have harassment in your workplace, there's something wrong. Number one, hire people that fit your culture. Once you get it established, you want to make sure that the people that you're bringing in support that idea of no harassment in the workplace, and they really fit and meet your culture needs. Emphasize trust and respect among employees, and then find ways to constantly reinforce your core values as an organization. That's extremely important. Once you put this type of a plan in place, not to just let it sit, you need to constantly reinforce what your company stands for, what they believe in, and how you feel about harassment in the workplace. Although it might be a once a year training for the employee, it should always be something that's stressed in anything that you do within your organization. Okay, so let's see if we have any questions. Right now there's one. It's, can harassment related to age under 40 also be illegal? For instance, if someone says you're too young to know something. Actually, they would not be able to file a lawsuit regarding harassment because none of the age I'm sorry, the discrimination against age would be for anyone over 40. So I would say that someone that is saying that certainly needs to be called down for it. That's no way to talk to someone, but it would not be an age discrimination issue. And is there a questionnaire guide for harassment inquiry with the employees and others involved? I think you're thinking of some way to interview those people that have been charged with harassment. Not quite sure. So is there a guide for harassment inquiry? I would say during a harassment inquiry, yes, you can certainly find something like that. Maybe what steps you should take, what questions you should ask within that. If you need help with that, please shoot me an email and I will find something for you. But yes, you should develop something very straightforward and practical so that you can, when you go into an interview, you ask the same questions that you do each time, unless the situations are very different. You should, though, have a patterned interview for the individuals that are involved in the charge of harassment. And I think that's what you're asking about, a patterned interview. Okay, any other questions? Well, remember, you will get this in an email following the class or session today. And if you have any questions after this is over, or you have any questions about the harassment training that Brianna is doing in October, please reach out to me and I will make sure that you get the information that you need. Sometimes, regardless of whether your state is requiring this training, it is a very good idea to go ahead and do it, because in many states it's highly recommended because of the court cases that have been settled that in favor of the employer, because they did have sexual harassment training or harassment training for all of their employees. So regardless, I think it might be a good idea for you to take advantage of the training. It's a very inexpensive training, and it is free to our HR services clients. If you are a client and would like that type of training, that would be free of charge if you're an HR services client. So anyway, I hope you have a great rest of the day and stay safe, and we'll see you next week.